Who is Randy?
Don't bring anyone mother into this.
Yo, mom in the fucking stand!
Bonjour, Ethan, c'est Suplee.
Oui, oui.
Ouais.
Oui.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Man, I'll just get right into it. You are a super inspiring dude, man.
Thank you very much.
You really are. I mean, I've obviously known who you are and seen you in countless shows and movies. And, I took note, like a lot of people did, at your incredible transformation. I still can't get over it. I mean, I don't know if that's old to you, but it's like, it's such a remarkable, like, I mean, I can so appreciate the discipline and the work of that transformation that, like, it never gets not incredibly impressive to me.
I can relate because when I look at images of myself from 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago, it's startling. It's a startling transformation.
It really is. And I think that, like, I was thinking about this before, when I knew you were coming on. I was like, I realized that I think most people never really have that much experience or engagement with somebody who gets really, really big.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you see people like that sometimes, but I mean, you don't really, you're not really informed. Like, how did that happen? Because that's one of your things, right? You go like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
How does somebody get, because most people who deal with like any type of weight issue, they have a kind of like a self-imposed limit.
Once we get here,
this is too much, and then you see somebody get big, like really big, like you were, and you just
I was over 500 pounds.
I mean, the other thing is that, like, a lot of people over 500 pounds, you don't live to even talk about it later, right? Because you're a ticking time bomb at that.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I guess, you have to kind of remind yourself is that you don't get to that quickly, so you can't get out of that quickly either, right?
But this is the thing that I think I'm trying to talk about as much as possible, because I think what you're touching on is the most important or the most valuable thing to try to get people, because it's impossible to have that point of view while you're in that point of view.
Yeah.
You wake up one day going, I can't do this anymore. And you want it, almost as if you want to just unzip the suit and step out of it. You need it gone. And so the inclination is get it off as fast as possible. This is so counterintuitive to keeping it off. Mm-hmm. And so I've done that. I've done, a pound a day for 80 days. I did 2 pounds a day for 40 days once. I've done 500 calorie a day diets. I've done the Beverly Hills diet where you're eating only pineapple for weeks at a time. And then they add in papaya. Like, really,
you've done it all.
The craziest diets in an attempt to get it off. Mm-hmm. And it always came back. And I was always looking for a solution to myself that I thought the diet would provide, or I thought X weight would fix me. If I just get to this weight, I'll be fixed.
Yes.
Never happened.
It never. And I'll say this, like, one thing, I've had up and down weights, and I think sometimes, like, when you have that struggle, but it's in a, more acceptable weight range, and you go like, oh, this is a struggle. People go like, you don't have a weight problem. The guy that weighs 500, and you're like, no, like
they're just, it's a relative problem.
Yeah, it's still bothersome, and I'm trying to do it, and I'm struggling, and they're like, don't worry about it. And you're like, oh, okay,
thank you,
thanks a lot.
This is helpful.
Thank you for diminishing my problems.
Right.
Because it you feel like you're like, there's people 20 pounds. They're like, I don't know what to do. They struggle. They fixate on these 20 pounds I can't shed, and it just feels like I know people that have had that kind of thought or like hindrance that it feels like it's there for years, and they just can't make the move, even though you kind of, the fascinating part about like the human mind to me is that you kind of know what to do.
Yeah.
But we're fascinating creatures in that you go like, I know I shouldn't eat this.
Yeah.
I know I should be more active. I know and you still will then not do what you need to do. And I I've always thought that like one of the worst parts about being overweight and struggling with it is the amount of time you spend thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the torture, right? Where you're like, I'm unhappy.
It's the only thought. It's a mantra.
And it's just like, you go to bed, think about it. You put on clothes, you think about it. You go down the stairs, you think about it. You're looking at people, you think about it. And you're like, this is consuming all my mental energy.
Yeah.
Just thinking about that I wish I didn't weigh like this.
I think that, like we all understand the principles at work unless we're really, but then I say that and I think about people who are raised eating food at gas stations and fast food.
Sure.
And I'm like, maybe they don't know. Maybe they have no idea what they're consuming calorically and how their body processes that, so there's that too. But I think you can understand like that you need to make a lifestyle change. And this word lifestyle is prevalent in diet culture. And you can actually have different points of view on what that means. For me, I always thought, well, a diet is a lifestyle change.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, because if you diet forever, you die. Mm-hmm. Faster, probably, than if you are fat. Starving will kill you quicker than being fat. Mm-hmm. That's why the body is kind of trained to accumulate fat and fights against diets with everything it can. Like just on a natural level, your body does not want to diet. It doesn't want to restrict food. And it wants to store calories and energy in the form of fat. So lifestyle change is really, how can I live forever in some state that is not this? What can I change forever for my life? And that's a big thing to look at. And I think when you get into the extreme stuff, I don't think people are necessarily being honest with themselves, going like, I'm going to never eat bread again.
Yeah.
Bread is my thing.
That's a big enemy for a lot of people. Bread.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we live in Los Angeles. We're kind of at the forefront of diet trends and fads. And bread has been a big no-go for a long time. And then we had gluten-free bread. And so there was a period in my life where it was just like, well, as long as I'm eating gluten-free bread,
then
I'm fine. Yeah. Not true.
Yeah.
It's actually got, most of it has more calories than non-gluten bread, which your body's going to store as fat. So it's just all of these things where it's like, I need it off today. I'm going to do something extreme to get there, whether that be adding in a bunch of exercise that is not sustainable for my life, or restricting food in some radical way that is also not sustainable for my life. And this is my lifestyle change. My lifestyle change will be this tiny little period of time while I'm dieting. And that's not actually a lifestyle change.
A lifestyle change, a real lifestyle change, is like a notable shift, right? Of like, I'm doing things.
I'm not going to live in the same way.
Yeah.
So it can be a radical shift. It can also be an incrementally small shift that, creating habits that eventually just lead you into living in a different way. But I think the actual thing that you've got to confront, or that I had to confront after 18 years of dieting, was dieting isn't the solution. It's not. It's, what do I do after the diet? How do I live in a different way?
Right. Because this can't be like a 30 or 60 day thing, because that's going to be over in 60 days.
Yeah.
I got to do something that's like a change that I can apply all the time.
Yeah.
Now, before we get to like the way down, which is fascinating, getting up to like, because like I said, you almost can't conceive of it, right? Like you go, like when you said I weighed over 500 pounds, it's like, I don't even know what to, you know what I mean? Like
it's a shocking,
it's an astonishing number, right? Do you, like, when you look back on it, it is over time, right? It's a gradual increase. Were you eating just reckless, incredible amounts of food?
Yes, I was. But there was a lot of psychological stuff. I was very uncomfortable eating in front of people. Yeah. So much of my eating would be at the end of the night. I'd hit a drive-through, get food for 5 or 6 people. Even sometimes joke with the gal or the guy I was buying it from that my friends are at home, like just making up stories because I'm mortified.
Yeah.
I even had one period in my life where I would fabricate these wild stories in my head about who sold better burgers, AM, PM, or 7-Eleven, and somehow convinced myself that the people working in those convenience stores were, more accustomed to the dregs of society than somebody at a fine establishment like a McDonald's drive-through. So it's okay to go in and let this person see me buying a bunch of cheeseburgers,
right.
just like completely irrational nonsense.
Yeah.
I also didn't do anything. I wasn't physically active at all. I played video games. I watched TV. I was a drug addict for a long time. I just.
What was your drug of choice?
Heroin, cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Serious drugs.
Yeah, but by the way, there was some part of me that was doing those drugs hoping I would get thin.
Yes.
And I would ruin every high every night by eating, because that was kind of like my blanket, my emotional comfort blanket at the end of the day was, I'm going to consume to the point where I can't move, basically.
Yeah.
Like when I drink to the point where I black out. If I'm going to eat on my own the way I want to eat, it's going to be to the point where I'm like one bite away from throwing up.
Wow. And that's probably how you consume drugs too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
So like full addiction.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think this thing, I mean, this is like real, Bush League psychology, but I think most people, when you see somebody at that size, like I'll tell you, my immediate thought is like, oh, this person has some trauma.
Yeah.
That like, cause it's almost from having seen shows, like TLC shows where they're like, when did you start gaining weight?
Right.
And the person, sometimes the interesting thing is the level of like delusion and denial of that patient. They'll be like, when did you start gaining weight? And they're like, when I was 16. And they're like, did anything happen when you're 16? They're like, no. And they're like, nothing. Like, I mean, I got molested, but like they'll reveal this traumatizing event, and then they're like, you don't think that's related to this? And they'll be like, I don't know, never really thought of it. And you realize that there's this horrible event that maybe, prompted. I imagine that like, since you've been there, when you see like a really obese person, does it like affect you? Like does it hit you in a certain way?
I feel empathy. I also am coming from a place where, having gone through, having experienced that, the amount of attention that you get because of it is horrible.
Right.
And so when I experience any reaction, I'm also rationalizing that I am positing my experience onto them, and making some moral judgment for them that I can't necessarily make. But I do feel that if a person, it makes me uncomfortable. Yes. Because I've been there, and I was very unhappy.
Yeah.
While I was there.
That's the thing, is that there's unhappiness. And
I mean, for me, there
you.
was.
Yeah.
I have a difficult time saying that my experience is the same as anyone else's.
That's fair.
But I do have a reaction, and I try to recognize what that reaction is connected to.
How do you feel when you see old images of yourself?
It makes me terrifically uncomfortable.
Okay.
But
that's very relatable. Because
Yeah.
I'll say that like when I see like the heaviest pictures of myself, I get like pretty notably sad.
Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't say notably, because I don't know that but inside, like even I'll see a photo and it'll be someone like, hey, I met you at this thing, and they'll tag me, and I'll see the picture and I'll be like, oh, like I'll feel bad about it. Cause in my mind, I don't look at the picture and the event and the person meeting me. My mind goes to like, how did you get to this point in this photo?
Yeah.
Why didn't you check yourself before this?
Yeah.
And it's actually like, it takes work for me to be like, okay, like that's what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And like, cause I'll want to beat myself up more about 6 years. You know what I mean? Like I'll be like, I can't believe you're okay. You were okay
right
with this. And it'll just be like this very kind of negative spiral.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's reality and it's the past.
Yeah. The first time I was invited to watch dailies at a movie was on Blow, and they had a truck, a big tractor trailer truck that had a projector in it, and you'd go and sit in it, and they'd project it across, you know, it was a bizarre thing. And every day they would watch dailies, and I got invited on the first day of dailies that I was in to watch them. And I walked out of the truck going like, this was a bad idea to watch that. And I've, from that point forward, never watched playback, never watched a movie I've been in, never watched a television, because there's nobody who could be more of a critic of me than me. And watching that was so shocking to see myself, because when I'm in myself, the most I'm seeing is my reflection in the mirror. I'm not getting really a sense of what my back looks like and what I look like from the side and all of this. And seeing myself on film, I walked out of there going like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this is a joke that I'm here in this movie.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that anybody wants me in this movie or to do this thing that I'm doing. And it affected me for a few days. And so now I have a much smaller version of that, but it's still the same thing where I'm seeing this going like, I can't connect it to a single thing, or there's no part of my life today that would ever allow that. And I've gained weight, you know, 4 years ago, I was 400 pounds.
4 years ago?
5 years ago. 5 years ago, I was 400 pounds, or 390. I had to have surgery on my bicep, and they wouldn't do it in the outpatient. I had to go into a hospital because of my weight. And my wife was like, what are you doing? And so I just have to keep that in mind forever, you know?
Yeah. So and so in your head, you always have the, you know, the reality that can happen again too, right? Yeah.
It is in me. If I am not diligent, I can go back to all of it, can all come back.
Yeah. For me, which I recognize is a different thing altogether, but for me, I realize that when I make food and fitness a priority, I'm happier, I look better, I feel better, all of it, but it has to be a priority in my life.
Yeah.
What happens to me is it is until it's not. And when it's not, everything changes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, how did I gain 40 pounds?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it just, and it feels like it happened quickly, but every time you like do the math, you're like, this didn't happen quickly. This was actually,
it's hard.
This.
Everything is easier with momentum.
Yeah.
And you create a habit, and it becomes a part of your life. And then for me, when it falls out, this is why like rest days for me are so stressful. I don't feel as good as when I go to the gym.
Yeah.
And it's just one of these days where am I gonna go to the gym tomorrow? Like, is this day gonna be contagious to the rest of the week and the rest of my life? And there's anxiety there because of it.
I totally get that, because I feel the anxiety built. Like sometimes, you know, you're not even like aware. Like my wife will be like, "Hey, like you all right? You're you know, like you're kind of short today, or you know, like something going on." And I'll be like, I don't know. And then I'll go, oh, I haven't worked out in a couple of days, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'll realize that she's like, well, could you go right now? So like you're making everybody feel weird.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, I'll go right now. But I also feel that momentum with like, you go, I'm gonna eat bad food. And then you have like your second meal and your third meal. Like, am I eating shitty? You're like, oh yeah, I'm just like continuously eating shitty.
Yeah.
Whereas like when you make the good choices, you find momentum in those.
Yeah.
Right. And then breakfast was good. I'm not gonna fuck it up at lunch, and then dinner, and then it goes into the next day. That momentum is very real.
It is, and I think it does go in both ways.
It does.
And getting back, I think it's just as hard, but you have more of a pull from history to get into revisit bad habits.
Yeah,
I do at least. You know, McRib is back, and suddenly I'm like, I could eat a McRib. I know I could eat a McRib. It wouldn't affect my life one way or the other. But am I going to then eat a McRib every day? Am I going to eat two?
And you have to think about that.
These are thoughts.
Yeah.
This is a legitimate thought to have. It is so much different than with drugs, because for me, drugs and alcohol are really an either or. I'm either doing them or I'm not.
Yeah.
Food, you have to eat.
You have to.
So it's so much more complicated.
It's always been a point of fascination, is hearing about food addiction and sex addiction mostly because they are like kind of biological functions of life.
Yeah.
So you go, well, how does the person who has an issue with either of these do them? Like, like
Right.
how can you consume food if you're,
Yeah.
and it feels like when somebody's really deep in that, that's got to be a struggle. That's got to be a struggle.
Yeah. The last 2 years, I've spent more time working actively on maintenance than I have on diet. And when I say that, I just mean, diet. When I say diet, I don't mean the way I eat. I mean restrictive eating.
Mm-hmm.
And maintenance is still quasi restrictive because I'm thinking about everything and I'm planning everything. But the intention is not to gain or lose weight. The intention is to maintain my weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've broken up fat loss phases with these really long maintenance periods because I think with a diet or a standard diet or a traditional diet, you do something to the point where you hit your number, whatever that is. And then even if there's a little period where it changes slightly, it ends. And then you just are kind of like left to figure out life.
Right.
And that's always failed for me because I don't figure out life well on my own, like innately or, biologically. I'm going to eat everything secretively. That's what I do.
Yeah.
So if I'm not planning it out,
You got to have a plan.
I have to. And when I've done stuff like increased exercise by a lot with the intention of losing weight, I've never then gone at the end of that cycle, well, now that I'm not doing this, how am I going to change my food? Because I was eating in a way that was built around this exercise too. So now I'm subtracting all this used energy out of it.
Yeah.
And not factoring in that it's going to affect the way my body reacts to food.
Yeah.
There's just all these little tricks that I don't think standard dieting or fad dieting addresses.
Yeah, I think you're right. And man, I'm also thinking about the way you can lie to yourself.
Yeah.
Even about like your appearance. I remember like in my worst photos or whatever, I'll look at them and I'll be like, when I was that, I didn't see myself as that.
Right.
Like, I lied to myself about the way I looked. I lied to myself about what I'm eating, whether it's good. And, it's all like kind of delusion in your mind.
Yeah.
It's just,
I do farmer carries sometimes.
mm-hmm.
I've never even gotten to the point of what my weight was at my heaviest with farmer carries. I mean, I would have to carry almost 300 pounds. So I've done 225 farmer carries with like a hex bar, but I've never really gone heavier than that.
Yeah.
And even that, just walking around, it's so shocking how difficult it is to move around. And this was just constant at one point. That the fact that happened over so long to get to that point, and the fact that it takes so long to come off, it just skews everything because it takes looking at old pictures to go like, this was real.
Yeah.
And
see how fucking far you've come too.
Yeah. I can't always remember accurately.
I believe that.
How bad my feet hurt all the time. But I do remember stuff like sitting down in a chair at 500 pounds. I was first like feeling it. Is this chair going to collapse? Because I don't want to be on my ass on the floor. Number one, it's embarrassing. Number two, I could hurt myself. Like there's things to think about. At 500 pounds falling down.
I remember a guy that size in college in the student center.
Yeah.
On a folding chair, it going on him. And you hear it. It's like a gunshot.
Yeah.
It's like the metal folding chair. And he was a real big dude. And you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that chair just gave out.
I would, if I was ever around somebody and they fell or their chair gave out, I would suddenly be like, people are now expecting it of me.
Right.
Like even being near in proximity to it would cause me to have this feeling of like, they all expect me to be next.
Right. Or they're like, you probably fucking did this.
Right. You sat in that chair first.
Ethan switched chairs, guys.
Yeah. It's his
Asshole.
fault. Right.
Do you mind if I look at old photos?
No. I've gotten better at that.
Yeah. I mean, well, the thing is, man, the reality is, unrecognizable.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
It's like, I mean, I just don't. It's not like you're like, oh yeah, you came down some. It's
but
like
look, a lot of the pictures we're even looking at, that's not my heaviest. Remember the Titans was not my heaviest.
What do you think you weigh there, or do you know?
I'm probably close to 500 pounds there, but I gained weight after that. American History X still not my heaviest, but I mean, I'm 450 there at least.
Was it a thrill to get a swastika tattooed on your shoulder?
Bro, that picture, I had that picture on Instagram and they pulled it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They said it was inciting violence.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. It's very sensible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Not ridiculous. What a fucking stupid thing. God, I hate them.
It was shocking to me. Like, am I getting in trouble now?
You know what they did to me? They reached out to me through my agent and they were like, hey, if he doesn't remove this post, we're going to delete the account. And I was like, what post is it? Somebody had, the deep fake videos where they take like put my face on this like pimp's face who was like, I'm a blast y'all, man. Like, it was a ridiculous deep fake. And they're like, he's threatening violence and for the guy going like this with his hand. And I was like, they're going to delete my account for this?
The whole account.
They're like, yeah, because you're like this promoting killing someone. I'm like, this is
insane.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Here you go, man.
Insane.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a... Now, this is something, I can remember, I know my weight from every year, essentially, that I've been alive. I could tell you, like, what I weighed, how I felt, what was going on in my life. Like,
Yeah.
I remember I'm dating a girl in college. I'm dating her freshman year, which I think is probably the heaviest and most out of shape that I get is like summer after. Because in high school, I was gaining weight all through high school, but you kind of could like carry it in a way because I'm playing sports all the time, playing football, basketball, and you're like, oh, I should lose weight, but at least I'm super active. I go to college as a freshman in college. I'm not playing sports with the same weight. So I start to like, I gain a little weight, but the weight that I do have all starts to go on me too. It's like, I look worse even though the number isn't like that much more. Now I'm a sophomore in college and I think I'm the one of the biggest I've been. I'm like 255, but I'm not carrying it well. It looks bad and I feel bad. And I break up with the girl. So now I'm single. And I remember I was like a weekend, we're driving around, I'm a passenger. And I can remember vividly being a passenger in this car, and it's like a lazy Sunday. We had gotten, I don't know, something to eat, lunch, and I'm looking out the window, and when I come back in the car, I see myself in the side mirror. And, you instinctively do something when you're standing and say in front of the mirror at home, which is like you kind of like position yourself to look better. Like you do it in like milliseconds.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is how I look. And I happened to stop and look, and I saw like how big my face was. And the next day, I went to a gym in this town in North Carolina, and I got a trainer, and I was like, I can't believe I've been getting laid, but it's not going to happen again if I look like this. And she put me on a meal plan, a workout plan, and I dropped like 60 pounds over like a period of time. I don't know. It was like, at that age, I'm like 6-9 months or something like that.
Yeah.
I felt so much better. But I do clearly remember seeing myself in the side mirror and going like, you have to do something.
Yeah.
And like when you get to like 5, so like your absolute peak, do you have a moment or is it more like a process?
There was a moment, and the moment was, there were 2 factors. And one was I was seeing a girl who is now my wife. We have 4 kids. I'm very happy.
Yeah.
The story ended well. I'm seeing her, and she likes to go on hikes. She likes to go to the beach. She lived in Paris for a period of her life right before I met her, and she liked to go there and walk around all day and look at stuff.
And when you met her, are you like, you're super heavy when you meet her?
Yeah. Well, I had met her when we were 16. I met her. When I started seeing her, yes, I was super heavy. So I'm seeing her. She is the first person who is not treating me like there's something to be real worried about. It was bizarre. She's loves me and is the first girl who wasn't dating me because I was an actor.
Right.
For sure. or that I wasn't paying for or something. You know, it was just two people who enjoyed each other's company. And I'm flying to Romania to do a movie, and I was going to do another movie that fell apart with Jim Caviezel. He happens to be on the flight from LA to Frankfurt, and he comes and sits next to me, and he gives me this hours-long talk about how I'm basically not living a moral life.
A moral life?
Well, I mean, he didn't say moral, but he's very religious. And he was...
Oh, yeah. He played JC, right?
Yeah. And it was all kind of framed around emulating Christ. And I was very clearly not doing that.
Fuck out of here, Jim.
Listen, I couldn't relate to it in the terms he was using, but in fairness, he was a guy who was concerned about me, and he was expressing concern. And this was not something that happened commonly, especially about my weight. My friends had had a number of interventions with me about drugs, but there wasn't a whole lot of I mean, they were talking amongst themselves, but nobody was sitting me down and going, what the fuck, dude? Let's get you sorted out. He kind of had this conversation with me, and it got me thinking, I'm really happy in this relationship with this girl. Where does it go with me in this state? I can't do a lot of the things she wants to do. How long do I think I have a shot with her if I don't make some change? The first conversation I had with her about this was the most scary conversation I've ever had. It was almost as though I was telling somebody who didn't know, hey, I'm overweight.
Right.
I'm morbidly obese. You hadn't seen this, but I'm going to let you peek behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
It was complete and utter nonsense the way I was processing it, because obviously she knows.
Right.
And asking her for help in changing was the hardest thing I've ever done, because I felt like I was really, by doing that, I could lose her, especially if I blew it. If I didn't come through, I lose her for sure. And if I don't change, I lose her. So if I put my cards on the table and say, I'm really...
How long do you know her or have been dating her when you have this conversation?
I'd known her for 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I'd been dating her for 6 months.
Okay.
And
so, but you're dating her
maybe
6
not
months?
that long, 4 or 5 months. We weren't real serious at this point.
You weren't.
No.
But you are dating.
Yeah.
And you're 500 plus pounds.
Yeah. She was totally fine with public displays of affection. It would mortify me because I didn't want people to think less of her because of me.
Jesus.
So I didn't want to even hold her hand in public. It was a lot of cognitive dissonance in my head about how do I, pretty much any girl up until this point, I didn't really care about in deep terms. I wanted attention from girls. I wasn't going to get that because I was attractive.
Yeah.
I would get that because, whatever, I was an actor, or I was witty, or using other tools. Suddenly, here's a girl who doesn't care about any of that, just likes me. And I want to change for her, but at the same time, I don't want her to be tainted by associating with it. It's a lot to process.
Which is deep. It's sad to hear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So when you tell her that you need help, I'm assuming she responded really well.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then starts going, well, we need to start with this.
I said, I want to lose weight. I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. I'll do whatever you say. And I was in Romania for a couple of weeks at that point, and then I went back, and as I landed, she was like, here's what we're doing. You're doing this liquid diet where you just drink protein shakes and take all this fiber and vitamins and shit. And am I allowed to swear?
Fuck yeah.
Okay, good. And so I did that for 2 months and lost 80 pounds.
Oh,
yeah, it was great.
that's a lot of weight to just drop in 2 months.
Yeah.
So you're obviously feeling like this is the right direction to head in.
That was the right direction to head in. And you can't, I mean, I guess you can, but I was going back to work after this 2-month stint, and, you know, being at like 400 or 500 calories a day, like every time you stand up, every time I stood up, I was blacking out, like not to the point of collapsing, but like my vision would go dark and come back. It wasn't enough to like go and work and do 14-hour days on a movie. And so the backup to that was kind of like, I think at the time it was a blood type diet, where it was like, what blood type are you? Okay, here's all the food you're allowed to eat in moderation. And I continued to lose weight doing that. But it cut out like basically bread and pasta and rice and all the stuff that you think about with like paleo or keto type diets.
Yeah.
It was like a modified version of that. So I continued losing weight doing that. And then I just kind of, you know, I never was above 400 pounds from that point on. Like once I got from 550 to under 400, I never was above 400 pounds. So that, like that chunk of weight I successfully lost and never put back on.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And I read that you got really into cycling.
Yeah.
So at what weight? Because I think of like cycling, I'm like, man, those are usually like really lean guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can, if you're not a like experienced cyclist, you can ride a bike casually up a slight incline. You're like, this is impossible.
Yeah.
You know, but like, did you start it when you were heavy?
I started when I was heavy. I went in 2011 and rode most of the stages of the Tour de France, all the mountain stages.
What?
Yeah. I was like a real.
But how did you get to that? You were just natural at it?
After My Name is Earl, I think I started My Name is Earl.
Shout out to Greg Garcia.
Yeah, Greg Garcia is the best.
He's the best.
I was around 300 pounds, and by the time we were finished, I was around 400 pounds.
This is, okay, from filming the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just like, you know, 4 or 5 years of like, you know, you're on set. I wasn't really focused on anything. I was trying to eat keto-ish, but I was eating way too much. And when it ended, I had this moment of like, God, I'm rich. I could do whatever I want. I'm going to go ride a bike. And I started riding a bike. And for 2 years, I basically just rode a bike 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. That's all I did. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I got down to 215. If you look at my Wikipedia, I believe the picture in there is from me at my lightest.
That time. Let's see. This is cycling, Ethan. Oh yeah, man.
Yeah. I was properly thin then.
Wow.
Yeah. But
and what that's what year? Oh, that's in 2011.
Yeah.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah, spandex and everything. There were a few instances where dudes followed me on my bike and took pictures of me, and then the stories were all like, look at his loose skin from weight loss.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And I just kind of was like, well, fuck you. I'm not going to talk about this then. Like, it's not something that I want. Like, if that's what
we can't celebrate the
right. The fact that I've lost hundreds of pounds is no good. Loose skin is the thing we're going to highlight here.
It's just, all of that is just everybody going like, now I feel better.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I got to pick on
He's
somebody.
still fucked up.
Right. Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah.
But now you're fucking jacked, dude. Like, I mean, these arms are insane, man.
I went from that. I wasn't really happy being thin like that. I felt, I didn't feel powerful. I felt very like frail almost.
Yeah.
I had strong legs. I could deadlift a lot back then, but I just felt weak. And I also was starving myself while I rode a bike. It was all still extreme. I kind of gave up on being thin to ride a bike around 2012 and started lifting weights. And from 2014 to 2016, I lifted weights and ate everything in sight and got close to 400 pounds again.
Really?
But I was in the gym every day lifting weights.
Wow. And then I'm assuming you got way stronger in that period.
Yeah.
Because like, this is not a fucking 6 months of lifting here.
No. I've been lifting weights for years.
Yeah.
I just I didn't know how to do that in a rational way.
Right.
So I've been doing cuts like the way bodybuilders do cuts. trying to preserve as much muscle as I can. I haven't actually built muscle in a few years.
Now, do you have the thing where, because I think it was also one of those shows that I watched one time where the trainer, it was like trainer had befriended a really big guy.
Yeah.
Like a 500-pound guy. And started, got him to go on walks, right? Drinking water, a lot more water, just kind of like baby steps into it. And at one point, I remember on the show, he goes, just sit on the couch here, now stand up. And the guy does it, and he's like, dude, you're squatting 500 pounds right now. Right. Like, I mean, I knew what he meant. You know? And he's like, oh yeah. So he's like, your legs are like fucking tree trunks, I mean, there must have been some of that, right? Like you have some foundation of, because you're carrying all that weight.
Well, that was, this was the other kind of most recent evolution was when, at that picture you saw from 2011, I never had abs, and I was so thin, and I was killing myself exercising every day and not eating. And it's something like, you sound like you grew up like a fit guy. I was fat my whole life. Like the pinnacle for me has always been abs.
Yeah.
And
I've never seen abs on myself.
Really?
No.
Well,
never.
I was very low body fat there, doing insane amounts of cardio, riding my bike hundreds of miles a week.
Yeah.
Very lean, still no abs.
Dude.
And it was a bummer.
Yeah.
And so, in 2016, when I was like, I don't want to be fat anymore. I wanted to preserve as much muscle as possible and concentrate on fat loss. And so it took me a couple of years to get abs, but I got them.
Pull up his Instagram, if you don't mind. Dude.
I mean, there's a lot of loose skin.
Yeah, but still, man, look at that fucking picture of you. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. I could see your abs.
Yeah. There's a better one. That was my wife made me post that because she said I didn't look angry. But yeah, the side by side is actually a different picture.
She said you didn't look angry?
That one is actually different. Like you see the striations in my leg, but she's like, you look angry. I think there's better definition in my abs in that one too. Look at you on the left there. Yeah, that's my heaviest. That's 550.
And when you see that, do you go like, I mean, is it like what we were talking? Do you go like, the fuck did
it's, that's 20 years ago. And I have not been in that state for so long. That's like looking at a different person, honestly. Really I don't know. I was also a drug addict at the time.
Yeah.
So, I can't remember that day.
Oh, right. Because heroin.
I was doing a lot of drugs, and that's before rehab, before getting sober. And I cannot relate to that guy at all.
Yeah.
At this point.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, by the way, about, because I remember when I got down, the lowest I got down to as an adult, like adult weight, is 185.
Right.
And I remember I was like, man, especially in hindsight, and when you get out of that weight, you realize how differently you get treated in all types of things.
Yeah.
Women treated me differently. Certainly were nicer to me.
Yeah.
Guys, like, I feel like some dudes, like things that I wasn't used to experiencing, like a guy being like, what do you look at, like at a bar? And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's never happened to me when I was 230.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like a guy kind of being like,
you're alphaing each other out.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, wait, what's happening? Like, this has never happened before. And then I could always tell that one of my tells of like I'm gaining weight, if I've lost weight, is when someone starts saying things like big fella, like, hey, hey, big guy. And I'm like, what did I do?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh shit, I gained like fucking 30 pounds or something.
Yeah.
It's like the little things. And as soon as somebody starts calling me big guy or big fella or asks me what to get on the menu, I'm like, shit, I need to go for a fucking run.
Yeah.
Because people are treating me differently. But both ends of it are very notable. I noticed that, like what you're saying, like when you feel like you've been lifting and there's like a certain, I don't know, confidence that comes with that.
Yeah. I think it's not just muscular. I think it's hormonal too. I think all of that stuff plays a part in it. I feel so much better at the weight I am now than I did at 215. Because I think I'm eating a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
I'm happier in the size that I am.
What was like, just to like kind of get a summary of it. You go back. I mean, I don't care if you're talking to me at 455, 550. What was like a day like then?
A day then, typically I would wake up and kind of be like, a little moment of like, I didn't die in my sleep.
Jesus.
There was that upon waking. I would have to sleep almost sitting up because I couldn't breathe if I was laying on my back.
Oof. And you had a CPAP then or no?
I did at some point. I think after rehab I had a CPAP, but not before rehab. And so I had drugs and obesity or morbid obesity that were both like just hindering my ability to breathe.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't even like I'd fall asleep and stop breathing. I'd lay down and noticeably the weight on my chest, I couldn't breathe. So I'd have to sleep sitting
crazy.
up. Yeah. And then everything was just slow. I still give myself a hell of a lot of extra time for anything that has like a time deadline, like getting to an airport or going to work. I can't be rushed. It stresses me out to no end.
And you especially can't be rushed when you're way heavier.
Well, and I think it comes from that. One of the biggest fights my wife and I have ever had, we had a place in Florida. We're driving to the airport to come back here, and
we're in Florida, just
Tampa.
Okay.
And we're heading there, and there's a big mall, and I'm like always a little stressed out about being late for stuff. Mm-hmm. But it all comes back to the fact that if I rush, I'm going to be pouring sweat mm-hmm. and out of breath and shaky from the fact that I've exerted myself so hard. So I don't rush. So I need extra time. So she pulls off the freeway, and I'd lost weight at this point. Not a lot, but I'd been losing weight. And she starts going into this mall, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And she's like, we have so much time. And I had to explain to her, this is not, I can't do that. And she's like, you're fine. You can rush now. Look at you've made a huge change. It's okay. But there's something about this idea of rushing that stresses me out mm-hmm. so much. And I think it all comes back to the point where I'm at that weight, rushing would have been a massive cardio feat that could have led to a heart attack or just total exhaustion and an inability to perform.
And even injury. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're rushing and you're 500. I mean, like you trip, you fall, like anything could happen that, because you felt rushed, maybe but I get the anxiety of that.
Yeah.
Completely. It's like, man, it's, God,
there's all those things. Not being able to sleep, and I didn't even answer your question. What did a day look like?
Oh,
if I had drugs, it would be making sure I had drugs for the next day. Mm-hmm. If I didn't have drugs, it would be making sure I got drugs for that day. And basically, it would be either going to work and being high all day, and then on my way home, stopping somewhere
and eating crazy, like 6 burgers and shit like that.
Yeah,
and you would work like there's movies and shows. You're high during that
the whole time. Yeah.
Wow. And how did that because that's one of the things you hear. How does that not? Because you're a fucking phenomenal actor.
Thank you.
And I mean you kill it. I mean you really are a great actor. Do you? I guess it didn't hinder the performances because you're like, oh, these are great performances.
I've not watched them. But I imagine if I watched the movies that I was in while I was using drugs, I would be able to see it.
You would know.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where, and then maybe you would be like, this could have been better.
Yeah.
There's
so many angles on this could have been better though.
Yeah.
So many aspects for that.
Sure.
It would make me so, even My Name is Earl, I've caught my kids watching that, and I was, they were alive. They were babies at the time.
Yeah.
And it makes me uncomfortable. And that's at a point where I had lost weight. I'm in a relationship. I'm sober. Like everything's great. And it still makes me uncomfortable that they're watching it.
Really?
Yeah. What does that have to be on for?
What's like, so now like no one's a baby anymore.
Yeah.
Does food and, your journey, is that like a big thing that's talked about? Cause I imagine that like, you know, I mean, like I think about my own parents and, you know, you see pictures and you ask questions, you start talking about what your life was. With you, it's like, it's a pretty dramatic thing for your kid to see like, that was you, Dad? Jesus Christ.
There was a ton for me as a kid that was off limits. There was never alcohol in my parents' house. Drugs were super taboo. And I was basically put on a restrictive diet at 5. And so whether that all backfired on my parents and I became the way I am and my compulsions and my addictions were formed because it was restrictive, or that I was unable to talk to them about helping me undo these compulsions because the restrictions were so authoritative that I was scared I'd get in trouble if it was discovered that I wasn't sticking to their rules. I've tried really to be lenient with the demands I place on my kids and in the house and what they eat and drugs, and there's always been alcohol in our house. My wife drinks. You know, listen, I haven't had this happen. I have had it happen with some of the lightweight drugs, but never with something like, if a kid came to me and said like, I really want to try heroin, I haven't really investigated how I'd react to that. I don't think I would react well. But with stuff like pot or mushrooms, it's and I have kids in college, so I'm not talking about little kids here. But I have to really take a temperate attitude with how I'm reacting to it and go like, what's true for me is not true for everyone else. So the way I experienced and used those things is not necessarily going to be the way they do. And if I put hard boundaries on anything, I'm just too scared that it's going to react in the opposite way.
You're really careful with boundaries.
I want to be able to communicate about everything. I want them to not feel like they're going to get in trouble for communicating about stuff or like revealing stuff that they think we're not going to like. And with rules like that, basically, yeah, in our house, like if you are upfront with us and do it in our house, like you're not going to get in trouble.
I think that's probably a much more.
It's just not the way I was raised. And I feel like the rules, I didn't react well to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it a thing for you, by the way, now? I mean, I imagine that it is, that, or at least from when you started to, let's say, lose notable weight, that you have to like kind of reconnect with your agents and be like, hey, just so you know.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm a couple 100 pounds less.
Yeah. And you know, the fat guy role doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels good, I'm sure, to make that call, right? And
you know, there was a period where after My Name is Earl, I did a bunch of pilots and none of them got picked up. And I kind of was like at a point where I got thin and was getting some negative feedback about being thin. But I was like legit thin. I don't think of myself as thin now, even though I'm lean. Mm-hmm. I'm still a large guy. Mm-hmm. And then I made a decision like, well, I'm going to gain weight again, and got up almost to 400 pounds again and did a TV show that I wouldn't have done had I been thin. And at the end of that, I kind of was like, it's not worth it. So if I have no acting career because I'm not fat, that's a fair trade to having to be fat or overweight.
Yeah.
I just am happier with how I am now. So, you know, I have a movie coming out at the end of this year. I did at the end of last year, which is cool. And I played an ex-military dude, which I'd never done anything like that before. So that's fun.
But that's gotta be a thrill.
Yeah, totally.
Like playing these parts that like before you would have looked at me like, that'd be cool to play, but
yeah,
I can't.
With Channing Tatum, we're both ex-military dudes. And it's like, this is that to me, if you'd said that to me 10 years ago, yeah, yes. It would have been like, no way. Yeah. That's awesome. If I never work again because I'm not fat, it's a fair trade for me.
Yeah. That's I think the right mentality to have.
Yeah, which was not my mentality 10 years ago.
Right. Now, what is like, the typical day now for you? Like, what's the average day like, food and exercise wise?
I meal prep. Uh-huh. So no matter what I'm doing, if I'm maintaining or I'm cutting, I tend to make food from Sunday night through Wednesday every week. So I'm not really thinking about what I'm eating. It's all made. It's ready to go. And I'm in the gym at least an hour every day. And I've been working too, doing a video game. I'll go to the gym before or after work, no matter what, just because it doesn't exhaust me.
But what's like your food consumption like in a day? Like what's a typical breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever, however you want to break it down?
If I'm going to the gym first thing in the morning, I have whey protein and water before I work out. And then my meals are a lean protein, a carbohydrate, and some veggies. And the protein can be anything, steak, fish, chicken. The carbohydrates, typically rice or potatoes, and the veggies are whatever I want. And that I'll eat 4 of those meals a day. And then I'll have casein protein before I go to bed.
Casein protein? I don't even know what that is.
It's just a different type of protein. It takes you longer to digest it. So like as you're sleeping, you're digesting it slowly.
And you're drinking a ton of water too?
Ton of water, yeah.
Do you find, because something that's popped into my head too, that I remember when I was at the heaviest I'd been, I had in my mind the number I needed to get to.
Yeah.
And I remember getting to it and being like, this is not what I wanted to be at.
Yeah.
And it's why I try to not fix it. Because whenever you start talking about numbers, especially like numbers you're trying to get to, everybody has an opinion.
Right.
And you're like, wait, why are you telling me this?
Right.
You know? So like, I remember at the time, I had in my mind that the perfect weight was 225.
Right.
Because I had seen, I think, so many football players.
And that's just
like,
an average.
I'm like, so I'll just look like that guy.
Yeah.
Like that linebacker for the fucking Chiefs is 225.
Yeah.
So that's what I should weigh. And then I got down to 225. I'm like, this looks like shit on me.
Right.
So then I went to 215. And so I start telling people weights, and then it's all their opinions, which I'm like, I don't fucking want to hear it. This just happened to me. So I got injured December 1st. I'm down 25 pounds, and I was like FaceTiming with my family back home, and my sister was like, oh, you look good, you know? I was like, yeah, you know, I've lost this weight. I'm gonna try to lose. And I say, don't do that. Right. And I go, I'm sorry. She's like, don't do that. I'm like, what should I do? 10 more, that's it. And I'm like, why?
Right.
And she's like, you'll look sick, weird.
Right.
You don't look good like that. You're big, so just carry more weight. And I'm like, well, I'll clear it with you when I get there. So I guess, you know, you tell me what to weigh then.
I've never once looked at myself and thought, this is what I want it to look like. It's never happened.
Yeah.
So, and the numbers became super irrelevant a long time ago. And as far as like the metrics on weight loss go, one of the things with keto, which I did for years, that I don't think a lot of people understand, is that when you take out carbohydrates, a lot of what you're losing initially is just water. And so that's not fat. That's just liquid stored in your muscles. That's what carbohydrates do, is they allow you to hold on and fill your muscles with liquid. So you remove that and you're suddenly going to drop that. You're not losing fat necessarily. So I could eat a bunch of salt today, drink a bunch of water, and have a 10-pound swing, no problem.
Yeah.
On the scale. That's not fat. So I'm really hyper concentrating now on retaining muscle and just losing fat when I lose weight, and not, you know, the other thing that I didn't factor in through all of my extreme dieting is when you get into a deep, deep caloric deficit, you're over a long period of time, you're going to be eating up muscle too.
Yeah.
And so I wound up at 215 with no abs and no upper body muscle because my body ate it all because I wasn't using them.
Right.
You know, I was just riding a bike.
Cycling.
So I had big legs and zero upper body muscle. And I was like miserable about how I looked.
Really?
Miserable. I mean, I looked frail. I was still, I was 215. That's a pretty big guy.
Sure.
But I, you know, everything was bony, and I was just not happy with it at all.
Do you weigh yourself now?
All the time.
All the time.
I mean, 3 times a week.
And then do you have that, I don't know, range that you allow yourself to stay in?
I'm looking at trends though. I'm marking it down and looking at like what do my fluctuations look like over a month. So if I'm doing maintenance and I'm going up 3 or 4, down 4 or 5, whatever, in any direction, that's a swing that's completely fine. But if I go up 3 or 4 and then up 3 or 4 and then up 3 or 4, I got to readjust what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I use it.
But you're super dialed into it now. I mean, it seems like we were talking about like priority, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have a priority. I think the thing too about, I mean, I guess it's obvious, but it does, like, your story and what you've done, I think really makes people go like, oh, this is achievable. This is doable.
Yeah.
If a guy could get down from 500 plus pounds, that means if you're 500 plus pounds, you can do it. But also if you're not, like, I think it's really, it's super inspiring, man.
There's nothing special about me at all. And by the way, I could have done it a hell of a lot faster if I knew today, if what I knew today, I knew 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. It would have been something that was a very easy progression that I then figured out. I've maintained this for a long time, but only really for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
There is nothing special about me other than I've tried a shitload of diets. I've failed at all this stuff, and I wasn't afraid to do it again. It meant something to me. The other real big problem I find with our diet culture is like this kind of I find that a lot of people are either trying to sell us something or making some kind of a moral decision on our behalfs and telling us this is the diet that across the board is the way to eat, whether it's like veganism or carnivore or keto or lectins are bad or this thing is bad. That's not going to be true for everyone. So figuring out what you can do long term has been really, really beneficial to me too.
Yeah. Yeah. You got it. Yeah. Figuring out how to do it. I mean,
again, looking at the idea of what a lifestyle change is from a different angle, the diet is a very temporary thing. How am I going to exist beyond the diet is what I'm way more concentrated on now. For the first time, over the last few years, that's been what my sights have been set on.
Do you have, like, I don't know, a way to summarize how to exist outside of the diet? Like, what is it for you?
My suggestion would be, and this is not what I would suggest for somebody who's got 5 pounds to lose or 10 pounds to lose. But if you're confronting massive weight loss, don't do it in one shot. Take a lot of diet breaks, and in those breaks, make the maintenance period as important as the diet period is. Your body, when it's dieting, is under a lot of stress. Your hormones get out of whack. You're starving it. Everything in your body wants to fight against starving. Yeah. Starving will kill you faster than being overweight. So don't expect it to happen overnight. Take your time. Plan on it taking double the time, and then like building a house. Imagine that it's going to even take 2/3 more than that.
Yep.
And take a lot of breaks, and in those breaks, really figure out how you're going to live in this new thing. Because when you're eating enough to maintain your weight, all of your hormones come back. The fatigue from stressing your body out from dieting dissipates. Losing fat is much easier when you're fresh to the diet. So in the long term, it actually turns out to be a lot easier with breaks than it is doing it in just a straight line. By the way, if you start at 500 and you go down to 200, your calories keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If you do one of these diets where it's like everybody eats 600 calories a day, the amount of fat you're going to burn towards the end of that diet versus what you were burning, it's going to be much less. Your body's going to become more efficient at using those 600 calories. There's all kinds of processes that your body does to mitigate the effects of dieting. This might not be true for a lean person who's looking to lose a couple of pounds and is going to do it over the course of a week. But we're talking about like somebody who's got hundreds of pounds of fat to lose.
Yeah.
The amount of stress on your lean tissue over that period of time. I remember doing keto for a year, and I like to gauge my body fat through DEXA scans because I find it to be the most accurate. And I was losing 40% muscle. For every 10 pounds of fat or every 10 pounds of mass, 4 of them would be muscle. And I'm going like, how am I ever going to have abs if I'm consuming muscle? It's just, I'm going to look the same and
what
just
was the
shrink.
answer to that? How could you do that?
I needed to increase my protein and work out in a little bit of a different way than I was working out.
Okay.
But I needed to massively increase my protein. If you're, the other thing is like really thinking or figuring out what your goal is. If my wife is like, I'm one size up from this dress that I want to wear to a party, and I only give a shit about it for this weekend, then her diet to get to that weight or that size for this weekend is completely different than my lifestyle.
For sure.
If she wants to get to that size and maintain it, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But like, what are your goals? My goal was a 6-pack. Now my goal is obliques. These are arbitrary goals that just keep me on this hamster wheel of staying accountable to myself.
Right. Which you need.
I do.
You need to have that.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I remember this when, like I said, the first time that I dropped weight, I was a sophomore. I was like 20 years old, I think. And I remember that when I finally got done with it, someone had said, and I had read, that most people that lose like 50 or more pounds gain it back in a year.
Yeah.
And like that was the amount of time they're like, it's like, I forget, there was some stat, right? Like 2% of people keep it off more than a year. So I was like, man, I got to hit this year mark.
Yeah.
And then I hit the year.
And then it came.
I was like, I guess I'm good.
Yeah.
And then I kept it off for like, I probably kept the majority of it off like 3 years. Yeah. And I really did think, I was like, well, that's in the past.
I'm fixed.
Yeah. And then I remember that I started, like, because it's funny how you start putting together, like, how did it come back? And I started working post-production, the graveyard shift.
Right.
Overnight. So you go into work at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
and get off at 7 a.m. I remember just being like, I don't know, 6 months into that or something and not being able to close pants.
Yeah.
I was like, what? And like,
how did this happen?
Yeah. And you start going like, well, I am eating all night.
Right. And just sitting around.
And sitting in a post bay.
Everything is against us right now. Our bodies evolved over, I'm sorry for the creationists out there listening to this, but our bodies evolved over
the last 6,000 years.
Right.
Yes.
To be super active. And for the most part, we spent a lot of our time tracking down food.
That was all we did.
And now there's no scarcity, at least here in America.
Right.
It's every time we go to get gas, you can get 2,000 calories for $3.
Yeah.
And eat for a family of 6, and it's not going to put a dent in your wallet.
Yeah.
It's everywhere you turn. I haven't watched network television in a while. I turned it on in a hotel not long ago, and it was all medicine and food.
Yeah.
Everything, medicine and food. That like we have perfected medicine and food.
Yeah.
And nobody's active. There's you see what construction workers go to work with giant coolers. And I'm like, yeah, that dude's going to be physically working all day.
All day.
And he's still eating too much.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like you can't.
Well, when you think about it, because I would have this problem. One of the heaviest I was in the last 10 years was like 2015. And I was working out like a lunatic with this trainer.
Yeah.
And, it was hour and 80-minute workouts. But what I would do is like, I would work out to exhaustion.
Yeah.
And then be like, I can eat anything.
Right.
And the one thing that I struggle with for sure is with portions.
Yeah.
Like portions, and I actually, I have to be reminded of it sometimes. But like when I was in the hospital, the reason that like it was in my mind so much is like at first, they're urging you to eat because you're in pain and you're on painkillers and you're like, I don't want to eat. And they're like, well, can you eat something? You take like a couple bites. After a few days of that, you're like, man, I am eating way too much. Right. Like, because then like
I'm not doing it. I'm just sitting here.
Yeah. It's like, but like the fifth day, I was actually eating so little that I was telling myself, you normally eat way too much.
Yeah. Like, in real life.
In real life. Because I'm actually having like normal meals in these places, and I'm like not even finishing them.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is what a normal person eats.
Yeah.
I'm eating like 3 times this amount, and I don't need to.
Right.
But you kind of have to like have the experience, or the reminder of like, you don't need that much food.
And that, again, I hate to try to sell this so hard, and it's nothing that I own, so it's not really selling it to you, but the idea of maintenance, all of what I consider, because I think about people in terms of normal and like myself, abnormal, especially with regard to drugs and alcohol and food. And the normal people, I just think like, he just will stop.
Yeah.
My wife will go out to dinner, she'll get a glass of wine, and oftentimes we'll leave and there will be half a glass of wine still in the thing. And it makes me anxious. Like, how are you not finishing that? You have to finish your wine.
Yeah.
Kids leaving food on plates. I'm like, are you not compelled to just have a clean plate? Whatever, consume everything.
Yeah.
Whatever biological processes are there to stop a quote unquote normal person, I trampled on. As a kid, I destroyed, because I would eat in secret, hiding it from my parents, and do it as fast as possible and get as much in as possible, and then go like, hey, I haven't eaten anything. So when I'm doing maintenance, I'm measuring. I mean, today I don't have to measure it as diligently. I can eyeball a cup of rice.
Because you know it now.
Yeah, I can eyeball 8 ounces of chicken. But in the beginning, learning this, I'm really taking the time to make a meal. Then I'm sitting there and eating it and not watching TV, because I can eat a hell of a lot more mindlessly while watching TV.
Sure.
What does my body feel when I'm done eating this meal? Is there a signal there if it's really faint because I've destroyed it over the years? Is there anything where I'm going like, that's enough? And it's still something I got to talk myself through.
Yeah.
But these normies really have it made, man.
Dude, the normies dude, I can tell you so many times where like I'll look back and I'll go, man, I would just, all my food consumption was like, especially meals, were to the point of like, no, there's no room left. And then I'd be like, I'm physically uncomfortable. It kind of hurts. Like, well, that's when the meal.
That's it. That's my body saying I've had enough.
And walking back to the hotel, like trying to breathe. Dude, one time I was in Cleveland and there was an amazing restaurant there that closed last year, I think, the Greenhouse Tavern. I would tell people, like, you got to go. It's like a foodie restaurant, right? And they'd have, like you could tell it was like star chef kind of stuff, really creative cuisine.
Yeah.
I went there one time. I had a show and I was like, you got to get me over there before they close, man. They got me there just in time. And they would always have different things on the menu because they're farm to table, seasonal stuff. So I get this, that, and I go, is there anything else? And the guy goes, oh, you got to try the pig. And I go, oh, okay. Throw that on there too then. Dude, do you know what he brings out? Half a fucking pig.
Right.
Half a pig. And it's supposed to be, you can tell by the way it's presented, this is for like 6 people to share because there's like 6 buns. So that you're supposed to like chop up this meat and make a sandwich.
It's just for you.
It's just for me.
Yeah.
So I have like the appetizer, something else.
And
the pig comes out, and I can't finish. I mean, it is an unbelievable amount of food. I've already eaten. Then he brings something else. I walk out of there and the hotel is right there. And I go, I think my stomach lining is tearing right now. I go, I'm going to be fucking sick. So, and I'm big at this point. I don't remember what I weigh, but I was like, oh my God. So I walk in the hotel and I go to the hotel gym and I go, I can't, if I go to my room, I'm going to lay down, I'm going to fucking puke.
Yeah.
So I get on the treadmill and just walk. I'm in like dress clothes. Right. I'm just walking and I FaceTime my wife. She's like, are you at the gym? I was like, I'll puke if I don't stay here a while. Yeah. And I walked in the hotel treadmill for like 45 minutes just trying to digest food. Yeah. And I knew it was like obviously way too much, but that wasn't that unfamiliar of a feeling of like, just keep eating, man. Like mindless eating.
This is I don't really mess with cheat meals much at all. And you know, when I did the first time this idea like came to me in a diet book, I think it was Tim Ferriss's diet book, and it said like you eat this way and then you get a cheat day. Dude, I was just, my version of cheating is not what Tim Ferriss's version of cheating is.
Yeah.
You know, my version of cheating is like a day at a buffet where all I do is eat.
Yeah.
And I'm poisoning myself with food. And so my fantasies of like Christmas, what is Christmas? What does that meal mean to me? It's not the food I'm going to eat. It's the amount that I'm kind of titillated by, you know, tantalizing. This idea of eating to the point of intoxication.
Yeah. And then you like, there's a point where I remember I go, like, you ever go to like almost like tapas style places or like the bazaar where like one of his theories, I guess, is that these amazing tastes are best in small doses.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have it, right? A bite of something and you're like, that's amazing. And they're like, well, that's done. And since they're providing it, you go, oh yeah, like the fulfillment, the thrill actually is there in the bite.
Right.
Right. And then they're moving you on to some other small taste of something. And you're like, yeah, but without somebody breaking it down like that, I would just, well, give me 100 of those, I guess.
And I'll eat them.
Yeah.
To the point where they don't taste good.
I mean, meat is a great example because, I mean, I've taken pride in taking down steaks that are enormous.
Yeah.
Now I don't even really have the tolerance to. Like, I actually can't consume what I once could consume as far as red meat.
Yeah.
But I don't even want to. But I think back and I'm like, man, I would just be like, well, this is a 32-ounce pork. I got to clean this
problem.
up. And like the last bites, I'm like, like just
doesn't taste good anymore.
No,
You're
and I feel
down.
sick eating it. And I'm like, well, you know, but I had to eat it because it's there.
Right. No, yeah, it's very difficult for me to leave food on a plate.
Yeah.
This is not an easy thing. This is something I have to convince myself to
Which
do.
is like why that prep you do is so important. Like you're laying out, this is the food to eat.
And by the way, I try to take it back to the earliest point of potential failure. If I go to a grocery store while I'm hungry, I'll make a bad decision.
Oh yeah.
So if I go to cook while I'm hungry, suddenly I'm not measuring the oil as diligently. Suddenly I'm seasoning it with a lot more salt than I'm supposed to have. Like, salt is not such an issue because it's not going to actually produce fat gain, but it is, if I've made a rule, I don't want to break the rule. So what are my potentials for breaking the rule? Are entering into things when I'm at a point where I'm not thinking clearly, and hunger makes me not think clearly.
Oh, I so identify with that. Oh, tons of all bad decisions food-wise happen to me when hungry.
Yeah.
All of them. I mean, the worst is if you're like, hey, I'm hungry, and you go, you pick up lunch or dinner. I'll come back and you'll be like, are there 13 people coming over?
Right.
Because I'll just be like, I thought we'd each have 6 of these or something. You know, like
yeah.
I can't. Once I'm hungry, I just feel like I have to. And even like, ordering on an app, like,
oh yeah, it's
because
so
I'll be like,
dangerous.
oh, let's get all these.
Yeah.
And then they come to
well,
the house.
we're just going to try them. And then you wind up eating a lot more than a try.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. These are all the things that I've been thinking about deeply. And if the reality is there's nothing special about me, but I have been working at this for a long time. So if the idea that you don't even have as much as me, or you have more than me. I also was dealing with drug addiction.
Yeah.
Like anybody can do it. It's slightly more complicated, I think, than demonizing a food or a food group and saying, unless you have autoimmune and you're legitimately allergic. But I think the propensity to say that the onus of responsibility is on the food is prevalent in diet culture.
Yes.
And I don't think that's true.
And I think it's fair.
It's not.
It's also like kind of pushing the responsibility off of yourself.
Yeah.
Which like there's already so much of that in society where it's like nothing's your fault.
Right.
Your life isn't your fault. The decisions you make aren't your fault. When it's like, you're responsible for
at the end of the day, we all have to be.
We all have to be responsible for what we decide to do,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus. I don't know. I know you're saying you're not special. I think you're special because I don't know anybody like you. So, I mean, it's remarkable what you've done, man.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I find it inspiring. I mean, I look at your page and I'll be like, man, I got to go down to the gym and work out right now. You know, I'll think about what I'm eating that day just from looking at your page, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I find it. And I bet you a lot of people feel that way.
That is truly, you know, I feel like it's a little bit of a cheat, but I do use that to keep myself accountable to some degree.
Sure.
I do. And talking about it, it's all very helpful to me.
It's one of the things, I mean, this sounds like narcissistic, but like as soon as, you know, you lose, like for me, I lose some weight like I have recently.
Yeah.
And people start noticing, I don't want that to go away.
Yeah.
It's right. It's like, it's a little thing, but it's like people notice. So that's a good thing. I try to take that reinforcement and I go, don't fuck this up.
Yeah.
You know, like try to keep going in the right direction. So I totally get that like there's that little bit of, you know, applause for it. And you're like, well, then keep going.
Yeah.
You know? But I think, dude, I'm certain there's a lot of people following you that feel that way. A lot.
Yeah. People, I have gotten, I mean, by the way, I don't know if it's the difference between Twitter and Instagram and 2020 and 2012, but the difference in just people going like, hey, you look great now. I also do feel better than I looked when I was very thin and not muscular.
You feel
and
better
starving
now.
myself.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very much happier with how I look and willing to talk about it. I wasn't when it was like, let's just look at your loose skin. Every picture I have where I'm basically naked, you can see loose skin.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to concentrate on, that's fine. But I think there's a bigger story there.
Of course there's a bigger story there. But I mean, people are always, I mean, you know, any photo of anyone, it could be like a model and people are like, look at her fucking eyebrow. And you're like, what?
Right.
It's a fucking supermodel.
Yeah.
What do you want her to fucking chop her eyebrows off?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, man. How challenging is it to go to on set now? As like you really have to prepare to go to a production and be on set you know, you're in Atlanta, Vancouver, whatever for however long.
I've spent a lot of time in Louisiana in 19. And I spent a lot of time at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
And I haven't eaten set food in many years.
You're like, I'm not gonna rely on that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's smart. You have to, right?
Yeah. And I always have protein powder or, you know, some kind of beef jerky that's not covered in sugar and nitrates or something like that. Or even pure protein bars. Always, no matter where I go, I have them close by, simply because who knows what happens and I don't get to eat and suddenly I'm going to make a bad decision. I don't want to be in a position where I really do think another part of this is figuring out where you failed and plugging up those holes.
Yes. That's an important point to make because a lot of people, I mean, you know, I do this myself where you fail, but it's like, you don't want to face why you failed.
Right.
So you just kind of go around it.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do that in so many facets of life, right? Where you're just like, that didn't work out. I'd really not like to address why it didn't work out. I'll just look over here.
Yeah.
And like I think that can happen with food and exercise really easily.
For sure.
Where you're just like, I don't know, man. I just like food. That's the other one. It's like, I like food.
Yeah.
I used to say that and be like, I love when I see someone in shape and I go, I guess he doesn't like food.
Right. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That guy just doesn't like food.
Yeah.
That's why he doesn't.
And you think a little bit less of them too, because people who don't like food are assholes.
Wait, you don't like to eat?
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus
And they
Christ.
probably have bad taste in food.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then you realize like, oh, that's a fucking healthy, accountable guy.
Yeah.
He's just taking care of himself. And I'm like, the guy doesn't like to eat.
He eats ice cream like 3 times a year on a whim.
Yeah. Fucking asshole.
Yeah. Fuck those people.
God, the word normies.
Yeah. I hate them.
They're the worst.
Yeah.
What about like, I guess the same kind of thing applies. You take the family on vacation.
Well, I mean, I'm also a sicko and a degenerate, and I love to eat too.
Yeah.
The first, this first diet that I went on, that my wife put me on, 2001 or 2. I spent like 2 months watching food TV. It was kind of new at the time, and I just sat and watched food TV. I needed some kind of a connection with food. And then I became obsessed with cooking, and I would cook shit that I couldn't eat and like be making fresh homemade pasta with my kids, but not eating it. And I've dragged them around the world a couple of times to like, I took my wife to Beijing to watch her eat duck on like, they're basically like little crepes. I couldn't eat that. And she hates duck.
And you knew that I shouldn't introduce this to myself?
No. I was just watching her.
But you wanted to try it though, or no?
I wanted to just be near the food. Like we've done culinary tours of Europe.
That you didn't eat on?
That I didn't eat on.
But only because you go like, if I do, this is going to go south?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, I would have my parameters that I wouldn't break. And there were often restaurants that it was impossible. So I would just not eat and just be
You're doing this at like Michelin star restaurants?
Yeah.
Fuck.
And we're there and they're eating and I'm watching them and I'm trying to experience what their experience just through osmosis or something. Yeah. I did, but I'm not saying that's not the wise thing to do. And you know, like it would be like a guy getting sober and starting to work at a bar.
Yeah.
This is a stupid thing to do.
Right.
I am a mentally disabled, crazy person when it comes to my addictions. I've gone wine tasting with my wife many times and I taste the olive oil that the people produce because I can't taste the wine. You know, I probably have no business being anywhere near there. I've been sober a long time, so I'm safe to do that now. And I've had my food under control and it's not to the point where today, if there's a restaurant that I read about that's doing something super radical, I'm safe to go and have a meal there and I'll eat whatever I want.
And you'll eat whatever you want?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not so dire. 10 years ago, when I'm taking my kids to meet Dario in Chianti to watch him carve up beef and I'm on low fat, you know, this is maybe not the smartest decision to make.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand that. I didn't want to be like, hey, we're going to the French Laundry. And you're like, they have rice?
Right, exactly. What am I going to eat
What
there?
are you doing, man?
No, I'll go to town there now.
Okay.
But there were years where we went to Napa and I did not participate.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense when it's like newer,
right?
I'm glad, but now you're like at this. So
yeah, I'm also not as obsessed. When I was doing insanely restrictive diets, I was hyper obsessed with food. I wanted to cook all the time. I wanted to have some kind of a relationship with food that I wasn't getting through eating. Now I'm eating, honestly, more food than I've eaten in years, and I'm losing weight also because I've fine-tuned my diet and I've got it all under control.
How often do you work out or lift?
Every day.
7 days a week?
6 days a week.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And you have one rest day, full rest.
Yeah. And it's all very, there were years where I would just go to the gym and go like, let's see what I can do today. This is much more thought through. I'm not lifting heavy. I'm, on this, when I do these phases, it'll be like a 4-week period where all the workouts every Monday will be the same exercises. It will just become progressively more over the month so that the final Monday I'm lifting the heaviest and the most, but still not even really to true failure. It's created something that I can do forever.
Yeah.
It is a lifestyle. I'm never destroying myself in the gym. I look at the guys like, Goggins, and I respect him so much, and I think he's so inspirational. When I've done extreme stuff like that, it lasts a very short period of time and I hurt myself. I cannot do stuff like that forever. So I really am trying to cobble together a life that is truly a lifestyle change, that is something I can sustain forever.
The sustainability is like the most important factor because I think for a lot of, I feel the same way where I go like I did keto and I did it for like 6 or 9 months. And of course I lost a bunch of weight, but for me, I was like, I don't see, like some people are like, no, I live keto forever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but I can't, it just doesn't, like, I don't want that. So I have to figure out things that work for me.
Yeah. The other thing, because I did keto for a long time, and there was a period of time where I thought, no carbs, this is just how I'm going to live. It got to the point where I wasn't losing weight anymore. And so I then had to restrict my food. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I thought I was supposed to be able to eat anything. and I'm not losing weight. So I'm restricting my food. So now I'm just doing a low calorie diet.
Yeah.
What the fuck is the point?
Right.
So eventually I just gave it up because I also was consuming, that was the diet I was doing where I was consuming, if you eat too much protein on keto, it knocks you out of keto. You're not doing keto anymore.
Right. Because you got to have like that percentage that was like 75% fat.
It's more fat than protein, certainly.
And then like 15%, and you're like, okay. And then, and you can also eat too many calories on keto if you're not like kind of gauging it too,
Right. So if at the end of the day, I'm counting calories, I want rice.
Yeah.
If it's not fucking me up, if I'm not having some other weird reactions like inflammation or bloating or whatever people could potentially have from eating rice, which I don't, why not eat the stuff I want to eat? You know what I mean? Why not design the meals in a healthy way that make me feel the way I want to feel, that I can envision myself eating forever?
Yeah.
That to me is just, but look, I'm not knocking it. If people are happy doing keto forever, do it. But if you've got 500 pounds or 200 pounds to lose, and you hit a point where you're now having to literally count calories while doing keto, and you're wondering what's the difference between counting other types of calories, there is none. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so, I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot, man.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I think that's part of what can really intimidate people, is they just hear something like this and they go, I don't know, man, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, which is fine, fair. Yeah. I have no diet I'm trying to sell people. I don't think the way I eat works for everybody. I think people are happier doing stuff like keto or veganism. I eat 2 pounds of meat at least every day. So that's not going to work for a vegan. You eat 2 pounds of meat a day?
Yep. It's lean meat, but yeah, at least. On Sundays, I eat 2.5 pounds of meat.
Wow.
Chicken breasts, I'm counting fish as meat.
Yeah.
Salmon. I'm not eating ribeyes, but yeah, I'm having 2 pounds of lean protein every day in the form of meat. And then I'm also having whey protein and casein.
So what are your grams of protein a day?
At least 250 grams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to hit 200 right now.
It's not easy.
No.
It's a lot of food.
I know.
The other thing that's crazy, if you switch from high fat to low fat, the amount of calories per gram in fat versus protein and carbs, it's like 2.5 times. So you have 1 gram of fat that has 9 calories, and you have 1 gram of protein or carbohydrates that only has 4 calories. So you cut the fat out and increase the protein, you got more than double the amount just by volume.
Yeah.
So it becomes a lot more food.
And do you get some of these protein grams from protein shakes and everything?
Yeah. 50 grams a day, I think.
About 50 from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's taken me a while, but I was not loving my results. I wasn't getting my 6-pack doing keto. And every time I'd get a DEXA scan, my lean tissue was disappearing almost evenly with my fat. And so I just was like, how do I just lose fat? That's all I want to lose.
Right.
I have this muscle that I have because I'm fat. Why not just keep that? And so I looked at the way bodybuilders diet, and I really just modeled it after that.
Which was to
low fat,
get those protein grams in and working out.
Ton of protein, low fat, and a lot of exercise and weightlifting.
Yeah. That's the other thing is I think a lot of people wanting to lose weight just go, I just need to do tons of cardio.
Well, and this which I've done.
Right.
Yeah, but the minute you stop doing the cardio, if you don't suddenly change the way you're eating, you're going to gain weight because you've only been losing weight because of that. I think that's another extreme thing. I did that. I did bicycle riding 8 hours a day for 2 years.
That is so fucking insane.
It's insane. I was also starving myself while I was riding. So it was like the most unhealthy way I could have done that.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of weight. I got thin. Still didn't have abs. Still felt like a failure.
And the 2021 goal is obliques.
Yeah. Now, listen, I have a ton of loose skin, so it remains to be seen if I get that lean, if you'll even be able to see it, or the skin will just hang over it and cover it, because you have to have pretty taut skin to show those muscles. But this is my goal.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the goal, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I'll get to do another like Playgirl photo shoot.
Fucking do it at my house. I want to see that shit.
Greased up. It's awesome.
I got some baby oil.
Yes.
Do the whole thing. Yeah, dude. I'm so glad you came.
Thank you for having me.
I find this, like I said, I find your story incredibly inspiring. And I've enjoyed watching it. I'll continue to watch it. But I don't know. I get so much just out of seeing that transformation and and how you work at it and maintain it. I think it's awesome, man.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Monsieur Suplee.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.